The texture of the dull quilt touched the skin. Jung Hee-won didn't know how long it had been since she enjoyed a luxury like this. Everything was peaceful. She didn't need to be afraid of being attacked by monsters in the night or watch out for humans trying to steal her items. However, Jung Hee-won was well aware that this peace wouldn't last long. Jung Hee-won-chi, please open the door. I'm asking you for an interview. For a week, reporters had been clamoring in front of her house. She could glimpse flashes of light through the curtains. In front of the ruthless gazes of the cameras, Jung Hee-won felt a strong sense of déjà vu. It isn't just the constellations who are voyeurs. The abyssal black flame dragon is chuckling. The constellation secretive plotter agrees with your thoughts. Jung Hee-won felt a new sense of emotion at all the gaze on her. Before the scenario began, the forms were different, but there were still similar things. The voyeuristic gazes and the struggle for survival. In this sense, the scenario might be around before the scenario even started. Nobody knew it was a scenario. Through the window, she saw the broken city area and the blocked Seoldome. It had already been a week since they left Seoldome, but Jung Hee-won couldn't believe she was out of it. Hee-won, Uni, did you just wake up? Ah, yes, Ji-hee. Jung Hee-won smiled helplessly as Lee Ji-hee burst through the door. It had been 1 week after the escape from Seoldome. Many things had happened in the meantime. Jung Hee-won and the group were assisted with homes by the provisional government in the Gyeonggi area and were invited to the institute to answer a few questions. They were obvious questions. What happened inside Seoldome? Were the rumors on the internet true? How many people were like them, and what ideas did they have? What were the constellations in the scenario? At first, Jung Hee-won faithfully answered the questions as the representative. Then over time, the whole thing became annoying. She wondered what was the point in doing this. The South Korean government had already disappeared. The provisional government, made up of some lucky parliament and city council members, had no idea what happened. They still firmly believed that the state system would be meaningful in the face of future scenarios. For those who were still stuck to old beliefs despite the new era, Jung Hee-won had something to say to them. Take off your suits and ties first. Huh? They aren't good outfits to run away in. Jung Hee-won glanced at Lee Ji-hee. In any case, the party members were the only ones she could believe in. What about you, Sang-ashi? She is in a room with the kids. The problem was that the party members weren't well. Lee Ji-hee spoke in a dark voice. The loss of Dokja Ajashi is a big blow. Honestly, things were uncertain when he was with them, but once he was missing, everyone was lost. Everyone's purpose was survival, but it was Kim Dokja who decided the path of survival. It was natural for the party members to lose their direction and scatter. I wish I had the manual that the soldier Ajashi mentioned. Have you heard from Hyung-sung-shi yet? He's called to the army on the first day, but there's still no news. Lee Hyung-sung was originally a soldier, and it was natural for him to be called by the army. Lee Ji-hee whined. He's really foolish. I wouldn't have gone. What use is the army in this world? Jung Hee-won agreed with Lee Ji-hee's words, but she didn't want to scold Lee Hyung-sung. Everyone had different ways of dealing with loss. The children stayed in the room while Lee Hyung-sung returned to the army. It was just that the following scenario will start in 3 days. Jung Hee-won gulped as she saw the message floating in the air. 3 days later, hell would begin again. The more complicated problem was that the scenarios in the future were likely to be completely different from what they had already been through. You can now respond to the call of the sponsors and receive the personal trials they have set. Personal trials are treated as hidden scenarios and can be replaced with the main scenario if it overlaps the certain main scenarios. Scenario substitution is only available until the 25th main scenario begins. They passed the 10th scenario and opened the personal trials. Jung Hee-won didn't have a sense of what they were yet. Lee Ji-hee spoke in a comforting manner. Don't worry too much. Master said it isn't a big deal for a moment. How about you, Jung Hyuk-shi? I don't know where he went after Kim Dokja's song. He's unlike the real master. Certainly, Yu Jung-hyuk's reaction to Kim Dokja's death was puzzling. Yu Jung-hyuk stayed in his room like a broken person for a while before suddenly disappearing, saying he would be back in 3 days. Han Soo-young, she went to talk to the government officials this morning. She said it's time to reap the seeds that were sown. The government? What can she expect from them? Then something belatedly came to her mind. If something happens to me, unconditionally follow Han Soo-young. They were the words that Kim Dokja once left with her. Why did they have to move with Han Soo-young? However, there must be a reasonable explanation since Kim Dokja said this. Jung Hee-won got up and the surprised Lee Ji-hee asked, Are you going out? Yes, I can't continue staying inside here. We should also get ready. Then I'll go with you. Both of them didn't have a hesitant nature once they decided on something. Lee Ji-hee and Jung Hee-won headed straight out of the house. They opened the front door and the shutter sound poured towards them. Jung Hee-won-shi, I'm a reporter from Gyoro Ilbo. Only one word, please. And they weren't the only survivors. Nearly 1,000 people came back from the Seoul Dome. Some of them had been contacting the living and spoke about the terrible few months they lived. The reporters continued to find the party members despite accumulating enough stories. The reason was simple. Among the 1,000 survivors, Jung Hee-won and the others were celebrities who were at the center of the scenario. Jung Hee-won-chi, what happened inside there? I heard it was helpful that you learned kendo. Is that true? There's a rumor that you were a candidate for the national team. Jung Hee-won looked at the reporters pushing their microphones towards her. The government had told her not to tell the media what happened. She had been saving her words so far because she didn't find it easy to talk. Then why? Today, Jung Hee-won felt like saying something. You're curious about what happened inside there. Jung Hee-won let go of Lee Ji-hee's hand and looked at the banner waving outside. Yang Yeon-chung's hero, celebrating the safe return of Judge of Destruction, Jung Hee-won. Hero? Her? Hong Chung-gu had long since disappeared. Nevertheless, this banner was hung, and Jung Hee-won couldn't withstand it anymore. I'm not the hero you think I am. I wasn't a candidate for the national team, and I didn't do well in kendo. Jung Hee-won spoke into the microphone like she was talking to the whole world. Before the destruction came, I was just a bartender working at a cheap bar. Her words caused a stir among the reporters. Nobody could believe it. Someone scoffed and someone else looked a bit jealous. In front of these gazes, Jung Hee-won felt strangely free. She wasn't the old Jung Hee-won anymore. Jung Hee-won realized it with all these eyes on her. The reporters kept asking her questions. How could a bartender become one of the last survivors? How could she survive, and did she become the Judge of Destruction? The constellation Bald General of Justice is looking at you with sad eyes. The constellation One-Eyed Matria is reminded of someone by your words. The indirect messages of the constellations came from all over the place. Jung Hee-won opened her mouth without understanding her feelings. Do you know Kim Dokja? The constellation Maritime War God is nodding. The constellation Sho Al Il Pil remembers the name. The constellation Last Year of Huang Suangbol remembers him. The voices of the reporters followed after the constellation. Kim Dokja? Who is that? I seem to have heard it before. Jung Hee-won thought it was funny. They didn't know. Of course, they could never know. Jung Hee-won lightly breathed in and said, The last survivors didn't survive with our own strength. She suddenly felt like crying as she spoke. The reporters didn't know anything and kept asking questions. What are you saying? The name Kim Dokja isn't on the list of survivors. Why didn't Kim Dokja come back with you? Where's that person now? Where was he? Jung Hee-won didn't know. However, if she had one wish... That person! Jung Hee-won stared at the Seoul Dome. He'll be back. Definitely. At this time, Kim Dokja opened his eyes in the demon world. I screamed as I vomited and opened my eyes. The sound of my heartbeat was unfamiliar. A golden aura appeared around my heart and rough magic power was emitted. It might be broken, but it was still the heart of a dragon hatchling. The strong magic power of the transplanted material was enough to stun me. If I could use this properly, I wouldn't be lacking magic power in combat for a while. The attribute Lamart Kirin has allowed you to absorb the power of the broken story. In fact, absorbing a broken story was a dangerous idea. It would have been impossible for me without Lamart Kirin. Lamart Kirin isn't acknowledged among the other evolutionary attributes because it is less effective. However, it has the fewest side effects and doesn't absorb the weakness of the story. If I had obtained Darwin's Demon, another evolutionary attribute, I would have been killed the moment I ate the gold dragon story. This absorption effect was good because my safety was guaranteed. I didn't have multiple lives anymore. The story fragment, Broken Heart of a Young Gold Dragon, has been acquired. The original name of the story fragment was Heart of a Young Gold Dragon Who Was Torn to Death by an Outer God. However, I didn't absorb the torn to death by an outer god part. This was the advantage of Lamart Kirin. The absorption rate of the story was low, but the weakness wasn't absorbed. Your new body is being constructed. The creation of a new body will delay the collapse of your existence. This effect is temporary, and it is recommended to quickly return to the scenario. Magic power flowed through my new beating heart, and I could breathe a bit. At the very least, the tragedy of losing my birth story wouldn't happen anymore. The reconstruction of my body would start from now on. I started to eat right arm of the poor swordmaster who was stabbed in the back by a colleague. Rather than the tearing off flesh, it was closer to peeping at the story that broke as soon as it was seen. The story fragment, Right Arm of the Poor Swordmaster, has been acquired. I didn't know if it was just my imagination, but I felt that I could use the sword a bit better. The attribute Lamart Kirin has reached its saturation limit. Drop the saturation level to absorb new story fragments. I felt better after eating 2 story fragments and sat down on a pile of garbage. It is a bit cold. It was less painful than before, but the cold continued to prickle at my skin. The durability of my body had increased, but the exile penalty hadn't disappeared. I felt a big emptiness and loneliness from the loss of the story. I seemed to know why people wanted to hear, see, or read something over and over. Then a slight warmth started to flow through my body. Someone is talking about you. Talking about me? Your story is being created on planet Earth. I could see what happened. Someone was talking about me on Earth. Who was it? It couldn't be Yu Jun-hyuk, Lee Hyung-sung, Jung Hee-won, or Shin Yu-sung? I didn't know. Still, it was funny. Someone was telling my story. Someone still remembered. The new story, Kim Do-jaega's Legend, has been created on Peaceland. I hoped they would at least get my name right. I looked up at the night sky where the stars were invisible. This was the horizon of the story. I couldn't see the stars, and the stars couldn't see me. Thus, the arrogant stars wouldn't know. In a place they couldn't see, the story that was going to destroy them had just begun.